So, dear friends, once again, it's an auspicious welcome to all of you here in this presentation. I'm Dr. Atul Suryawanshi, MM College Patsora, District Jalgaon of this state. We are studying the module Fiction and Short Story, which is the third module prescribed for the study. Yesterday, we studied the concept of novel, the few things associated with novel. Just a minute. So, dear friends, as I told you yesterday, we studied the concept of novel. After that, we studied the types of novels: Bildungsroman novel, then social novel, realistic novel. So many types, approximately 14, 16 types we have studied yesterday. Today, we are going to study the novel from the point of view of ages, English ages. So, without dealing this, let us initiate this presentation. Let's have a fleeting glance on the various periods in English. The periods were divided into various sections. The very first period is known as the Anglo-Saxon period, which is known as Old English, which initiated 450 up to 1066. This is the old period of English, where very few select writing was there. After that, the next period is Middle English period, which is medieval period. So, the time duration was 1066 up to 1500. So it was middle period of English. Medieval English was used during this time. After that, the next period was the Renaissance period, which initiated in 1500 and lasted up to 1660. Renaissance means it is some sort of beginning, a new beginning, a renewal of the literature. The next period in this series is a neoclassical period which initiated in 1660 and lasted to 1798. After completion of this period, the new period initiated in English literature entitled the Romantic period, in which the English flourish and develop. The time period was 1798 and lasted up to 1832. The next period was Victorian Age, which began in 1832 and lasted up to 1901. Okay. The next period is Edwardian period. The beginning of the Edwardian period was 1901 and it lasted up to the First World War, which initiated in the year 1914. After accomplishment of the Edwardian period, there was modern period. It was altogether a new beginning. The modern period initiated after First World War, means the beginning is in 1914 and lasted up to the end of the Second World War, 1945. The Second World War came to an end, and this was the beginning of the postmodern period, which initiated in 1945, but actually after 1960 or 70 and lasted up to 1990 up to 200. So these are the approximate dates of the time. So the period and the ages are divided in such a way. So we are going to study the novels, important novels and important novelists during such ages. The first is Middle English period, which initiated in 1066 and lasted up to 1500. So as this was the important period when medieval English was in circulation, a very less writing was there. I humbly want to mention the select novelist here. The prominent novelist was a Geoffrey Chaucer, who is widely known as the father of English poetry, and who was the inspiration of William Shakespeare himself in writing, who is quite popular in literature for his Canterbury Tales, none other than Geoffrey Chaucer. After that, the prominent figure is William Langland, Thomas Malory, and Sir Thomas More. So these were the prominent figure in Middle English period. Apart from these writers, there were so many writers, but they are what we say insignificant for the sake of study. Let's have a fleeting glance on the prominent figure in this period, Geoffrey Chaucer. So he was the English writer best known for his literary piece in English literature entitled The Canterbury Tales. He has been called the father of English poetry. He was called as the father of English literature as well. As I told you that he was the inspiration for William Shakespeare, the greatest dramatist of the Elizabethan age. So Geoffrey Chaucer was basically a poet. He composed so many beautiful poems to arouse the drowsy human race. One of the best literary pieces written by Geoffrey Chaucer is entitled as Canterbury Tales, as I told you, which is very much important for the sake of exam. So this is the collection of 24 stories that runs to over 17,000 lines written in Middle English by this writer, by this poet. It is the journey of the group of the pilgrims, 31, including Chaucer himself, from the Tabard Inn and southward to St. Thomas Becket Shrine at Canterbury Cathedral. So you can visualize the picture of the book, The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, one of the prominent works in English literature. And so many times the question have been asked in the NET and SET examination on this work. So I request you to go in detail regarding this work. Search the stories related to this book. Study them in detail so that we can get perfection at the time of examination. The next period is Renaissance. Renaissance is some sort of renewal. It's a new beginning, as I told you. And this period initiated in 1500 and lasted up to 1660, means 160 years in all. So the prominent figure during this time were John Milton, the blind poet, William Shakespeare, the greatest dramatist of Elizabethan's age, who wrote 37 dramas in his lifespan and was quite popular for his sonnet writing. Sonnet is a poem of 14 lines. He composed 154 sonnets. The next figure is Edmund Spenser, Philip Sidney, and the next is Ben Jonson, widely known for his Volpone or the Fox. So this was a new period when English was looked from altogether a different perspective. So many new writers sprout up and they initiated writing to develop the novel, especially from the humanistic point of view. Most of the stories in the very beginning and the novels were associated with myth, Bible, religion, and afterwards the theme and the story change. So the first prominent figure here in this period is William Shakespeare, who is widely known as the father of drama. Born in 1564 in Stratford-on-Avon in England and passed away from this world in 1616. So he is famous for his 37 dramas and 154 sonnets. As I told you, sonnet is a poem of 14 lines. In one of his sonnets, he says, "Oh, none unless this miracle have might, that in black ink my love may still shine brightly," he says. He wrote 37 dramas. And one of them he published in 1597, entitled Romeo and Juliet, the most lamentable drama ever written in the history of English literature. You know, William Shakespeare has shown antagonism between the two families, the Montagues and the Capulets. Juliet belongs to the Capulets family and Romeo to the Montagues family, and there was enmity between these two families. Wherever they meet, they took out the sword. In such a feud, you know, that was immature love between Romeo and Juliet. They meet. There is famous balcony scene where Juliet asked the name to Romeo, and he answered, "What's the name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet," become quite popular in English literature. At the end of the drama, Romeo and Juliet both die, leaving their relatives to lament. So this is the most lamentable tragedy ever written by William Shakespeare. And each and every work of Shakespeare delivers a serious message. The tragedy of King Lear leaves the message that we should not feel a wrath in the heart. We should not be quick-tempered in our nature. Okay? So many works of William Shakespeare delivers very beautiful message for the human race. And so is the reason he is quite popular at the time of Elizabethan's age. His death anniversary has been celebrated as an international book day all over the world. to remember the greatness of William Shakespeare and his contemporary writers. International Book Day has been celebrated. So, in each and every university in the world, the works of William Shakespeare has been prescribed for detailed study. Shakespeare is an evergreen image in English literature. So let us turn towards the next phase here. Neoclassicism in English literature, which initiated in 1660 and lasted up to 1798 when lyrical ballads were published in English literature. So during this age, I want to mention here a few important novelists, beginning with John Dryden, the great satirist in the 18th century, Alexander Pope, who is quite popular for his Belinda, Rape of the Lock. Jonathan Swift is a great satirist. Daniel Defoe, as I told you, he is quite famous in literature for writing the very first novel in English entitled Robinson Crusoe. And Dr. Samuel Johnson for publishing his popular dictionary on English literature in 1755. So these are the select prominent figures during neoclassicism in English literature. So a fleeting glance has been offered only to the select novelist here in this presentation, but I humbly request you to search detail to all these novelists and their novels and their characters and the theme and the publication of the works for better understanding and to score maximum mark in the NET examination. So my dear friends, without wasting the time, let us proceed further towards the next slide in the series. One prominent figure during this age was Jonathan Swift, 1667 up to 1745. Three works of Jonathan Swift has been pinpointed here. The first is Modest Proposal, which published in 1729. The second was Gulliver's Travel in 1726. And the third was A Tale of a Tub, published in 1704. So there is a movie on the work Gulliver Travels in Bollywood, Jajantaram Mamantaram. So it is very beautiful literary piece and has been asked many times in NET and SET examination. So I request you to go through this work, literary work of Jonathan Swift, Gulliver Travels, published in 1726, as a prominent work in literature. So see, Gulliver's Travel, as I told you, published in 1726. The plot of this story is divided into 4 different sections. The first part of Gulliver's Travel deals with a voyage to Lilliput. The second part, a voyage to Brobdingnag. The third part deals with the voyage to Laputa. And the fourth part, a voyage to the land of the honeycomb. So in all, this book is an adventurous story. It is the travel of the Gulliver from the various lands that he visited, Lilliput, Brobdingnag, Laputa, and honeycomb. So, in one examination, the sequence was asked. These 4 parts were asked in the examination. So I request you to read this for the reference so that the understanding can be better. This is prominent work in English literature. I told you there is one Bollywood movie, Jajantaram Mamantaram, based on the same novel. The next prominent figure, who born in 1660 and passed away from this world in 1731, was Daniel Defoe. And Daniel Defoe was quite popular in English literature for writing Robinson Crusoe, the very first novel, which he published in 1719. This novel has been asked in the examination. The second novel entitled as Moll Flanders, published in 1722. So Moll stands for prostitute, a tart, whore. So this is the story of a woman, her sufferings, her torturings, her sentiments, and the best piece written in English literature ever by Daniel Defoe. The next is Roxana, which published in 1724. So these are the three prominent works written by the first prominent novelist in English, Daniel Defoe. Never forget his work Robinson Crusoe. So Robinson Crusoe, which he published in 1719, as a young and impulsive wanderer, defied his parents and went to sea. He was involved in a series of violent storms at the sea and was warned by the captain that he should not be a seafaring man. Ashamed to go to home, Robinson Crusoe boarded another ship and returned from a successful trip to Africa. So this is the adventurous trip for Robinson Crusoe. So this first novel is quite remarkable for the study. I request you to see the details of this novel. This was the beginning of the novels in English. Second prominent work written by Daniel Defoe, which was published in 1722, entitled Moll Flanders. As I told you, the very word moll signifies prostitution. A whore, a tart, has been described by Daniel Defoe. But it is not filthy, Daniel Defoe wants to highlight the problems and the sufferings and the sentiment, the feelings of a woman through Moll Flanders. So it follows reportedly the true story of Moll Flanders, born in Newgate prison. She wishes to escape her life to poverty, which leads her to commit many crimes, marry many men, and accidentally marry her brother. So she suffers. She goes astray. The novel focuses on the theme of greed. So we should not run behind passions alone. It's a somber message of Moll Flanders. This is, again, after Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe has been the prominent work in English literature. So read this. Read this for the education, for the entertainment, for getting a new idea, to gain new knowledge. Next writer in the series is Dr. Samuel Johnson, as I told you. And is quite popular for writing a dictionary of English language. This dictionary is known as Johnson's Dictionary, which published on 15 April 1755 and has been a landmark dictionary in the history of English literature. Dr. Samuel Johnson became popular after publishing this dictionary. This was the novel experiment for the very first time. And so this prominent work, the Dictionary of English Language, published in 1755, has been asked in NET and SET examination. So please read this. Go through it. Search the details of Dr. Samuel Johnson. The next period is a Romantic period, initiated in 1798 and lasted up to 1837. And this period is widely known less for the novels and more for poetry. And so is the reason here in this present slide, an effort is made to highlight select poets from this age, beginning from William Blake, 1757 up to 1827. The next, nature poet, William Wordsworth, 1770 up to 1850. His poem Daffodils is quite popular in English literature. The last line of Daffodils runs like they flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dance with the daffodils. William Wordsworth says, and he defines poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful human feelings recollected in tranquility. It's a very beautiful definition. The next prominent figure is Samuel Taylor Coleridge, widely known for his best literary poem in English literature ever written, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. He prayed best, who loved best, both things, great and small. For the dear God, he loved us, he made and loved us all, is the message of S.T. Coleridge through that poem. The time span of S.T. Coleridge is 1772 and lasted up to 1834. He is one of the prominent poets and writer during the Romantic period. The next is George Gordon, 1788 up to 1824. The next person, Percy Bysshe Shelley, P.B. Shelley, born in 1792 and passed away from this world in 1822. After that, the most sensuous poet, John Keats, Ode to an Autumn, born in 1795 and died in 1821, lived a very short life but became quite popular in English literature and during this Romantic period. So these are the select poets. Search their poetry. Go through it. I humbly request you for your kind perusal all these poets. Romantic period, there are select novelists, and the two novelists has been pinpointed here in this presentation. The first is Jane Austen, and the second is Walter Scott. The Romantic period initiated in 1798 and lasted up to 1837. So these are the approximate dates of the period. Let's begin with Jane Austen. The first novel, Sense and Sensibility, published in 1811. The next novel in the series, which is the story of Elizabeth and Fitzwilliam Darcy, Pride and Prejudice, which published in 1813. There is one Bollywood movie, Pride and Prejudice, based on this same movie, in which Aishwarya Rai played the key role in the movie. The next is Mansfield Park, published in 1814. The next is Imma, 1815. Northanger Abbey, 1880, posthumously means after death. Persuasion in 1880, after death. And the last novel, Lady Susan, in 1871. So these are the select novels written by Jane Austen. She lived a short life. But you know, the sequence of these novels were asked in the examination. Chronology of the arrangements of these novels from beginning up to the end was asked in the NATE examination. So learn it, recite it, by heart it, beginning from Sense and Sensibility up to Lady Susan. Jane Austen's work have been remarkable works in English literature. So please see this. Next is Pride and Prejudice. This novel follows the turbulent relationship between Elizabeth Bennet. There was a prejudice in her mind for the hero, the protagonist of this novel, the daughter of a country gentleman, and Fitzwilliam Darcy, the protagonist, the hero, the rich aristocratic landowner. They overcome pride and prejudice in order to fall in love. They fall in love with each other, and eventually at the end of this novel, they marry. But the very beginning of this novel is quite shattering. It is like this. These are the beginning, running lines of the novel. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in a want of a wife. So these lines are asked in the examination. The lines are an adaptation from Pride and Prejudice of Jane Austen. So to analyze the line from the semantic point of view, it can be said, the plain meaning is like this. A single man means a bachelor person, unmarried man who have a lot of wealth. He is in search of a wife. This is not the expected meaning to Jane Austen. Jane Austen says that a girl is in search of a boy to get married who has a well settled job and a lot of money with him. This is the expected intended meaning. So the lines are very significant. Please remember the lines. It is the truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be the word of wife by Jane Austen in Pride and Prejudice. The next prominent novelist, Walter Scott, widely known for writing Waverley in 1814. The protagonist, Edward Waverley, chooses an occupation in the army at a time just before the Jacobite uprising of 1745 and the advice of his father. Tolerance is the major theme of this novel, Waverley. So all the details are not possible to provide here. See this in detail on the night. Search it on the YouTube. See the printed books and study in detail. The next novel in the series, which published in 1819, is entitled as Ivanhoe. The novel focuses on the tension between the Saxons and the Normans who inhabited in England. So there is tension in this novel, written by Walter Scott, entitled Ivanhoe, one of the masterpieces in English literature, which published in 1819. The next period in the series is Victorian Age, which initiated in 1832 and lasted up to 1901, when there was the reign of Queen Victoria. So let's have a fleeting glance on the select major Victorian writers. Let's begin from the prominent figure Charles Dickens, William Thackeray, George Eliot, Thomas Hardy, Anne Bronte, Emil Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, Robert Stevenson, Lewis Carroll means Charles Ludwig Dodgson, Oscar Wilde, and Elizabeth Gaskell are the prominent figures during Victorian Age. So we have to see all of them in detail. Let's see the major work of Charles Dickens, which has been asked in the examination. Beginning from the Pickwick Papers. So Pickwick Paper was the beginning of Charles Dickens when no one was ready to publish his work. The Pickwick Paper published in 1837. Next in series, which published in 1837, was Oliver Twist. Then Nicholas Nickleby in 1839. Then Old Curiosity Shop. Then Dombey and Sons in 1848. Then David Copperfield in 1850. As I told you in the very preface of this novel, Charles Dickens admitted himself that I am the fond parent of every child, and in my heart of hearts there is a favorite child, and his name is David Copperfield, he says. The next in the series, which he published in 1853, was entitled Bleak House. Then Hard Times in 1854, A Tale of Two Cities. So which are the two cities? The question was asked in an examination. It is The Tale of London and Paris, published in 1859. So the next in the series is Great Expectations in 1860. And the last unfinished work written by Charles Dickens in 1870 is entitled as The Mystery of Edwin Drood. So remember, this is the unfinished work written by Charles Dickens, initiated from the Pickwick Papers up to The Mystery of the Edwin Drood. So this writer Charles Dickens is one of the prominent writers during the Victorian Age, and we have to study him in detail. Let's proceed further. The remarkable novel which focuses on the theme of child labor. This is Bildung's Roman category novel. The most autobiographical of Dickens' works, David Copperfield tells the moving story of Davy's humble journey from birth to maturity. And so in that sense, and this is the journey of this small boy from his birth up to going in the direction of adulthood to get the maturity in the life is a Bildungsroman. This is for the sake of reformation. This is for the sake of education in the life. So, in the very preface of the novel, as I told you, but like many fond parents, I have in my heart of hearts a favorite child, and his name is David Copperfield, said Charles Dickens himself, because this is the autobiography of the novelist himself. The next prominent figure is Mary Ann Evans. Her pen name was George Eliot. The time span is 1890 and lasted up to 1880. The prominent novelist and the novels are Adam Bede, which published in 1859, Milton the Floss, 1860, Silas Marner in 1861, Romola, 1862, and Middlemarch, 1871, are the select works of Eliot. So remember the pen name of this writer, which was asked during the examination. So one of the prominent writers, female writers. The next writer, Victorian writer, Thomas Hardy. Man is the puppet in the hands of cruel destiny. The prominent work, The Mayor of Casterbridge, 1886. Far from the Madding Crowd, which he published in 1874. Tales of D'Urberville was published in 1891. The Return of the Native in 1878. And the next novel in the series is Jude the Obscure, which he published in 1895, are the prominent work of this writer, Thomas Hardy. He presented a pessimistic point of view in most of his novels. So one of the prominent novels during the Victorian era. So let's proceed further towards the Edwardian period, which initiated in 1901 and lasted up to the beginning of the First World War, which initiated in 1914. The prominent and the dominant novelist during this time was J.M. Barrie, who is the writer of Peter Pan and Captain Hook. Then Ernest Bennett, G.K. Chesterton, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the detective writer, Sherlock Holmes. The next is Joseph Conrad, widely famous for his prominent novel, Heart of Darkness. The next is E.M. Forster. Then John Galsworthy, who is the recipient of the Nobel in Literature for his best writing, Saki. Then George Bernard Shaw, the BBC scholar who worked in British Broadcasting Corporation and received Nobel Prize in 1925 for his Drama of Ideas. George Bernard Shaw, the great writer. Then H.G. Wells. So these are the select writers during the Edwardian era. Let's proceed further. Major novels written by Joseph Conrad. As I told you, beginning from Almayer's Folly, which he published in 1895, An Outcast of the Island in 1896, The Nigger of Narcissus in 1897. The most prominent novel here in this series is Heart of Darkness, which he published in 1899. And this is the journey of Marlowe to visit Mr. Coons at the heart of Africa while crossing the Congo River. And the last words of Mr. Coons was asked in the examination was the horror were the last words of Mr. Coons. So this novel focuses the brutality of the British people on the black people. The next novel in the series is Lord Jim. Patna and Patusan incident have been pinpointed here in this novel. Lord Jim was the unfortunate hero, was published in the year 1900. So these are the prominent works of Joseph Conrad. Let's have a fleeting glance on Heart of Darkness, which centers around Marlowe, the protagonist, an introspective sailor and a journey up to the Congo River to meet Mr. Coates, reputed to be an idealistic man of the great abilities. Marlowe takes a job as a riverboat captain with the company, a Belgian concern organization to trade in the Congo. So, this is going to the core of the native people. This is the heart of darkness. Darkness stands for South Africa continent. So let's proceed further towards the recent ages, modernism, which initiated into 1900, actually after the First World War and lasted up to the end of the Second World War, means in 1945. So the prominent figure, these are the select figures, these are approximate figures. Franz Kafka, David Herbert Lawrence, Virginia Woolf, Thomas Stearns Eliot, Joseph Conrad, Samuel Beckett, who received Nobel Prize in 1969, William Butler Yeats, again a recipient of the Nobel Prize in 1923, the great Irish poet, are the selected prominent figure during this time. Modernism. Let's proceed further. Let's have a fleeting glance. The most reputed writer for writing altogether a different genre and literature, passions, D.H. Lawrence, David Herbert Lawrence, Peacock, which he published in 1911, The Three Process in 1912, Sons and Lovers in 1913, The Rainbow in 1915, Women in Love in 1920, The Lost Girl in 1920 again, Aaron's Rod in 1922, Kangaroo 1923, The Plum Serpent 1926, Lady Chatterley's Lover, The Passionate Story in 1928, and The Escape Cop in 1929 are the select prominent works written by D.H. Lawrence. So here, only one novel has been offered a fleeting glance here, Sons and Lovers, which he published in 1913. The novel traces the emotional conflict through the protagonist, Paul Morrell, the son of Gertrude Morrell, and his suffocating relationship with Miriam and Clara Dawes, the flippant woman, with a demanding mother and two very different lovers, which exert complex influences on the psycho-emotive development of his manhood. Now, at one point, when his mother was burning there in the burning heart at the time, Mariam was standing just beside the Paul Morrell, and I said, Mariam, I love my mother too much. She said, yeah, I know it, that every son loves the mother. He says, no, I'm not talking about that love. This is the physical love which he intends in his mind. This is the story of Sons and Lover. The mother substitutes the children for husband here in this novel. And it's altogether different writing, based two terms that we discuss in literature, Oedipus complex and Electra complex. So the theme is based on Oedipus complex here, entitled Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence. The next writer here in this series is Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf, one of the prominent writers. See the works. The Voyage Out, published in 1915, Night and Day, 1919, Jacob's Room, 1922, Mrs. Dalloway, a prominent work, very important work for the sake of examination, was published in 1925, To the Lighthouse in 1927, The Waves, 1931, The Years, 1937, and Between the Acts in 1941 are the prominent works written by Virginia Woolf. Remember this. Let's proceed further. Mrs. Dalloway is a prominent work asked in the examination, published in 1925. The English modernist writer Virginia Woolf took on the subject of the English middle classes. In the aftermath of the 1914 and up to 1918, that was the period of the First World War, it examines one day in the life of the Clarissa Dalloway, an upper-class Londoner married to a member of the Parliament. Mrs. Dalloway covers one day from morning to night in one lonely woman's life here. So Mrs. Dalloway is the story of a lonely woman. It is a very beautiful story from the psychomemory point of view. Let us turn incline towards the next period in English literature, postmodernism. Post means after modernism, which initiated after the Second World War, the end of the Second World War in 1945 and lasted up to 1990, means the recent time, and these are the approximate dates. Let's see the characteristic feature of this postmodern literature. The first, randomness. Means there is chaos, a zigzag, work harder. There is not discipline in writing. Randomness is there. Second, pluralism. Multiple meanings are possible. Not a single theme is there. There is ambiguity. The next is fragmentation. There is not unity. Fragmentation on the basis of caste, creed, color, religion, language. So in each and every sense, the fragmentation is there. The next is metafiction. Metafiction means it is the involvement of the writer himself in the writing. The next is intertextuality, means dependence of the one text on another. As I told you, this term was coined by the famous writer Julia Kristeva. The next, irony. Irony is a mode of speech in which the real meaning is exactly the opposite of that which is literally suggested in the story. And the next prominent characteristic of the postmodern era is absurdism. This is absurd theater. Nothing happens, but still it is very significant, it is very symbolic. Martin Isleen coined this term, absurdism. So these are the select characteristics of postmodernism. Let's proceed further. Let's have a fleeting glance at the select postmodern novelists then. Thomas Berger, Don Didelio, Vladimir Nabokov for Lolita, writing in 1955. Then Thomas Pynchon, Peter Ackroyd, Angela Carter, Salman Rushdie, and Umberto Eco are the select prominent figure during this time. Apart from these writers, there are so many prominent writers. This is the presentation. We have time limit here, so is the reason the select writers have been pinpointed and focused. So let's have a fleeting glance at the very prominent figure. He received Booker, the best writer in 40 years. Best Booker to Salman Rushdie. He is the writer of the novels Grimace, which published in 1975. The award-winning writing Midnight's Children in 1981, which grabbed him Booker Award. The story of Salim Sinai, as I told you. Historical elements are there in the story because it is associated with Indian freedom movement. The next novel in the series is Shame, which published in 1983. The controversial work, which was published in 1988, entitled The Satanic Verses. And in 1995, The Moor's Last Sigh. The Ground Beneath Her Feet was 1999. And Fury in 2000 are the selected prominent works written by Salman Rushdie in English literature. Let's proceed further. Select absurd novels. So, Molly, which published in 1955 by Samuel Beckett. The Unnameable in 1953 by Samuel Beckett once again. Samuel Beckett is the recipient of the Nobel in 1969. The Recognition in 1955 by William Gaddis. On the Road in 1957 by Jack Carouse. The Naked Lunch is a prominent, important work. Remember this, Naked Lunch in 1959 by William Burroughs. And The Tin Drum in 1959 by Gunter Grass. Gunter Grass is the recipient of the Nobel in 1999. So these are the select absurd novels. Apart from these novels, so many novels are there. So these are the sample novels for the study. See this, what is absurdism? What are the absurd novels? What are the themes? What are the characters? What is the motive behind? We have to trace it. The first novel has been pinpointed here is Molly, which published in 1951 by Samuel Beckett. So Moron is a private detective with a housekeeper Martha and son Jack, and both of whom he treats with scorn. He is a pedantic and extremely ordered and pursuing the task set him logically to the point of absurdity, expressing fear that his son will catch him masturbating and being an extreme disciplinarian is the theme of this novel, Mali, in short, written by Samuel Beckett, altogether different. So remember this work. The next is the Tin Drum. So Tin Drum is a Picaret's novel. Yesterday I told you, Picaro is a Spanish word which focuses on the theme of the central characters wandering from one place to another. And most of the time he is anti-hero who performs various adventures and adventures on the road or on the river, on the water. That is Picaret's novel. And I mention you, the Adventures of Huck Finn and the Adventures of Tom Sawyer, written by Mark Twain, the Samuel Clemens, are the most prominent Picaret's novel ever written in American literature. So like is Kingdom by Gunter Grass, the recipient of the Nobel in 1999. A purported autobiography of a dwarf who lives through the birth and death of Nazi Germany, published in 1959. The work's protagonist, Oscar, narrates the novel from an asylum and for the insane. So I request you to see this work, The Tin Drum, important piece of English literature written by Gunter Grass. So my dear friends, this is the end of today's presentation here. So here in this presentation, we attempted to focus the select novels according to the chronology of the ages, beginning from the Anglo-Saxon period, Middle English period, up to the post-modern period. The select novelists, important novelists only, and their important works have been pinpointed and focused here in this presentation. So this is the end of today's presentation. Tomorrow we are going to study the award-winning, means Booker-winning and Nobel-winning novels, their theme, their philosophy, their characters. So that will be very important for the sake of examination. So for today, let's stop. Thank you very much for being with me always very positively, dear friends. I hope that these presentations will surely help you. My number and my email ID is with you for further interaction. Thank you once again. Jai Hind. Have a nice time.